Hi, my name is Nzingah. I'm here to give you a tour of Unmurdered, which was an exhibit that premiered here at Old Dillard Museum. And this is an opportunity for anyone who didn't get to make it to see what we did. And basically the idea for the series is to bring back to life individuals who were murdered, people who were historically significant and some unknown individuals. Some of the people that we dealt with in this specific exhibit were individuals like Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Benazir Bhutto, Emmett Till, Amadou Diallo, John F. Kennedy, the four girls from the 16th Street bombing in Alabama, Patrice Lumumba, and most currently the Darfur genocide. What was done was basically we brought them back to life, and my side of it as the visual artist was to do a progressive aging. What would Martin Luther King look like if he was alive today, June 2009? What would Emmett Till look like? And then from the poetry aspect of it, what would they be saying today? What would they be speaking on? What would their voice on current issues be? So the major question for the series was, did you use a computer program? No. I started to do research online in terms of forensic artistry, and I started to take note of certain things, and then I implemented them in the portraits that I created for this series. One of the things that they suggested that a forensic artist do, or that what a forensic artist does, is they look at people in the family who aged over time. So I kind of looked at some of and the person we're talking about, of course, is Martin Luther King, if you couldn't recognize it. So what I did with Martin Luther King to progressively age him, I started to look at how people aged in general, and then specifically to people of African descent, because I've noted when I watched how people of European descent aged compared to someone of African descent, the aging process is a little different. And then, but there's some consistencies all across the board. One of the things that definitely goes is the chin area. So one of the things I did was I loosened up the skin and his chin area. Of course, there's the furrow from the laugh line that gets deeper, and your face essentially kind of drops skin-wise, elasticity, and then the lines, the crow's feet, as they like to call them, become more apparent. And of course, there's the notorious gray hair. So I had him gray some, and so this is kind of an idea of how I aged the specific person, Martin Luther King. Now I'm going to show you another example of my progressive aging work. Of course, hopefully you can recognize this individual, although they've been aged. This is Malcolm X. And with him, again, I accentuated his crow's feet. And what I always did in this process is I looked at pictures of people smiling, because then you can kind of see the wrinkles that are going to come into fruition later on. I put a deeper dent into his chin, added a couple more lines to his laugh line, and definitely he had a really predominant furrow, and I worked that in. And another thing I always noted is that everyone, hands down, would get the lines across their forehead. And everyone is like, okay, so you gave him a receding hairline. Hey, I have my, artistic right to take it there. So that's another trait that you'll see, particularly with men, is baldness. Not necessarily that was going to occur with him, but I said that's a potential. And then I added a little gray around his edges. Now I'm going to talk about some of the portraits, the progressive portraits that I worked on for the series and talk about some of the historical background of the individuals chosen. The first person I'm going to speak about is Emmett Till. If he were alive today, he would be 68 years old. Emmett Till was from Chicago, and he went to visit some relatives in Mississippi during segregation. And unfortunately, he didn't understand the dynamics of the time, and he whistled. And lo and behold, a couple days later, different individuals came to, and they kidnapped him and basically lynched him, and then threw him in the river. And they found his body a few days later, and it caused a big stir or brouhaha because of him being murdered for something so insignificant in some people's eye. And what was really interesting about his particular case is his mom decided to have an open casket at his funeral so that everyone can see this is what they did to my child. And if you ever get a chance to see the images, they're really horrific. So this is Emmett Till, and this is what I said he may have looked like if he were alive today. And again, this is the poetry by the poet Huru Ofori-Atta, who is from Ghana. He has a couple of CDs and is really known internationally for his work. Now, the next individual I'm going to talk about briefly is Amadou Diallo. If he were alive today, he'd have been 34 years old. And he's significant in the sense that he's a more current person in the Unmurdered series. He was murdered in New York City, and he was shot by police 40 times. And they thought he was armed, and the only thing he had in his hand was actually a wallet. And that caused a big stir, and there was protests and things of that nature. And he was from Guinea, so he wasn't born here. He was actually from Guinea, so it caused some little international conflict with his death. And really brought to the forefront how police officers in New York City were using unnecessary force with civilians. Now, the series is definitely not limited to any specific ethnic group. I've touched a lot of people globally. Someone specific to the United States would be former President John F. Kennedy. Then there is Benazir Bhutto, who was recently murdered, and I believe that was in 2007. She was one of the first female prime ministers in an Islamic state, and it was through a suicide bomber that she was murdered. And then we have Che Guevara, who's most known for the shirts that everyone wears now, but he is definitely someone that played a role in terms of the development of Cuba in the Castro era, and he was a freedom fighter who traveled the world. He went to Africa, went to Bolivia, Cuba to help fight for freedom for different individuals. This piece for the Unmurdered series is entitled The Women of 16th Street, which are the 4 girls who were victims of the 16th Street bombing for that church there. The church was known as the Center for Civil Rights Meetings and things of that nature, and because of that, the KKK decided that they were going to bomb the church, and there happened to be people in the church, and of the people there, 4 little girls were murdered. Now, I'm going to tell you who they are. Hopefully you'll look them up, and you can tell me yay or nay to my progressive aging. The first person to my right is Carol Robertson. And then we have Denise McNair. Then we have Ida Mae Collins. And then we have Cynthia Wesley. All right? And this was the largest piece of the series for me. It definitely took some time to work on them and trying to give them each their own identity and personality, not have them all look the same. As a matter of fact, this is a fact that some people know and some people don't know. Condoleezza Rice was friends with one of the girls from 16th Street. So that was really interesting to do. With every piece, I had to kind of do some background research on the individuals. Some people, I knew things about them, but once I really started to work on the series and did more extensive research, there was a lot of things that were brought to the forefront that I really didn't know, like the fact that the church was actually the center for civil rights meetings and things like that. And I had an opportunity to visit the location when I was in high school, so this piece is very dear to my heart. Now I'm going to talk about one last piece, and this is a piece dedicated to the Darfur genocide. This is not any specific person. It's just dedicated to the women and children who have suffered murdered as a result of the Darfur genocide, which is going on right now in Africa. I'd like to thank you for taking this abbreviated tour with me through the Unmurdered series. If you'd like to get more information about forthcoming shows, you can go to un-murder.com, where you can see these portraits. This is not the images that you saw today. There are going to be a lot more portraits being made. You can find out more about Haru Ofori-Atta, the collaborating poet, and you can actually read some of the poetry for the series on the website and find out more about both artists. Thank you.